Hello and welcome to Foreside's Partners Spotlight. I'm Darren Tappan with Foreside, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Michael Merrigan from Shadmoor. Mike, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great, Darren. Thanks so much for your time today and look forward to participating in this.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Mike, tell us a little bit about your background prior to forming Shadmoor, and then, how that experience, up until then, uniquely qualified you to launch the firm in 2014.
Sure. So I had spent my career in asset management. I graduated from Boston College in 97 and had worked for Gabelli Asset Management and primarily focused on operations, and then later went on and to Credit Suisse and a small fund of funds focused on investment due diligence of hedge funds. Um, I think as we went into the financial crisis at the end of '08, and we had bad actors such as Madoff, and we had counterparty risk issues where we had very severe issues with some counterparties like Bear Stearns and things like that. There was an acknowledgement in the alternatives industry that there needed to be a greater focus on operational due diligence going forward. And by operational due diligence, really meaning that there had to be more focus on how the business side of hedge funds, private equity funds, and venture capital funds were run. And that led me to meet some of the folks at General Motors Asset Management, and at the time, that was a $100 billion pension plan, and it was one of the top 10 pension plans in the world. And almost all of that capital, the 100 billion, was invested with third-party investment managers, and a number of them were in the alternative investment management space. And in the end of '08, as that crisis was unfolding, General Motors saw a need to bring this function in-house. And so I was hired, given that I had some investment due diligence experience, to start their first in-house operational due diligence program. And so I joined them in January of 2009, and I put together a team of individuals, and we started going out and meeting a number of the managers that were managing assets on behalf of General Motors pension plans. And that was the sort of beginning of my focus on operations diligence. After a few years, I went over to Gotex Fund Management, a fund of hedge funds that was mandates essentially investing in various types of hedge fund strategies. And eventually, I led their team of operational due diligence practitioners. And then in 2014, I started Shadmoor Advisors. So that was about 6.5 years ago. So for the last 10 years, I've been exclusively focused on operational due diligence.
That's great. That's great background. What's a typical type of a client that would engage Shadmoor?
So today, just to one other side about Shadmoor, we have a team of 5 people. We're located in Westport, Connecticut, and we work with about 25 different clients. Most of our clients tend to be investors in alternative investment funds, and that would include hedge funds, private equity, venture capital, things like that. And those investors are hiring us because those funds tend to be either illiquid and or in esoteric strategies. And so the thought being that our investors want to make sure that the operations of these funds is sound prior to making an investment where they actually don't have any control over the money or the capital that they're investing. And that capital may not come back to them for many months, quarters, or maybe even longer. So that's the primary part of what we do. And for those investors, we also do elements of ongoing monitoring. So after they've made those investments, we continue to monitor those from a operational perspective as well. We also work to a lesser extent with third-party marketing firms or placement agents. It's a similar role that we do for investors, but not identical, in the sense that the placement agents are hiring us not so much because the placement agent is an investor, but because the placement agent wants to make sure that the operations of the private fund that they're going to go out and raise money for are sound and are, implementing best practices whenever possible, and also to protect the reputation of the placement agent itself And then also prior to the placement agent going out and introducing this fund to all the allocator community, they want to make sure that any issues that come up from an operational perspective are identified and remediated. So those are the things that we help with. We also work occasionally, infrequently, with investment managers. And in those instances, it tends to be emerging managers in the private fund space who are about to partake in a fundraising campaign for a new fund they're launching, or they just recently launched their firm, or they're about a year or so into it. And they have a lot of family and friends money, but they haven't really raised institutional money. And they know that to raise institutional money, there's a lot more scrutiny, especially from operational due diligence people like Shadmoor. So we will help them prepare for groups like Shadmoor. And essentially, it's referred to sometimes as a mock operational. And then that also can lead to other projects like helping them with documentation and things like that. But those types of clients, meaning investment managers, there's just not a frequency associated with that. Those tend to be one-time projects. So we work much more frequently with investors and then to a lesser extent, third-party marketing firms.
That's great. That's really helpful. Compare yourself to other service providers in the greater universe, and then how does Shadmoor differentiate its offer?
So what I would say is it's ODD takes three forms, meaning operational diligence. You have someone like myself who previously worked at General Motors and at a fund of hedge funds, Gotex. And then on the other extreme, you have consultants out there in the operational diligence space who are primarily trying to have a business model where they write universal research reports on the top hedge funds in the industry or the top private equity funds. The funds that are really going to be large enough to take big institutional capital tickets and also are just mature and fairly recognizable and deemed to be somewhat lower risk because they just tend to have more resources in-house. We are now neither of those things. We are working in a co-sourced way with a smaller number of clients where we tailor our services to their specific needs. We come up with customized ODD programs for them, and we almost function as if we're an extension of their organization. So not as scalable as a business model as some of the other folks, but a very good option because Shadmoor's team of five, four of the five people are over 40 and have a tremendous amount of experience doing operational diligence and less expensive than, say, building out an in-house team if you were a college endowment or a foundation, something along those lines that's investing in alternative investment. And then I guess third, I would say that people are engaging us because we are a disinterested party in some respects, and in the sense that our alignment of interests is that we're going to get paid a certain fee to review a fund, whether regardless of the size of the investment and regardless of whether the investment happens or not. So we really don't have any skin in the game in the sense that we're going to be very objective about our feelings and our observations about a specific fund, because that fund is very unlikely to ever be one of our clients.
It's very helpful. Can you give us a sense what is the scope of a typical Shadmoor engagement?
Most of the work we do is geared towards initial investments or re-underwriting effectively of investments that are already in existence. And our product, in a sense, is really a very comprehensive operational due diligence report that can be as long as 50 pages. And it covers a lot of the areas and more that are on this slide. So when you think about operational due diligence, it's sort of the counterpart to investment due diligence. Investment due diligence is focused on risk and returns and how those are generated, portfolio exposures, risk statistics, how analysts are divided and contribute to the portfolio. Operations diligence is essentially everything else, and it just keeps kind of growing over time. But it includes things around the organization like who owns the general partner, the investment manager, employee turnover, are personnel related to each other, the different products, the profitability of the manager so that it can sustain itself as an ongoing entity, the counterparties of the fund that we're looking at, in terms of whether they use certain types of prime brokers or other sorts of counterparty arrangements, governance both internally and externally. So a private offshore fund might have a board of directors, but internally there may be a valuation committee, there could be a conflicts committee, and we like to understand how robust those are and how they resolve issues. We look at the entire legal and compliance program, and that can include regulatory correspondence, on-site examinations, registrations, disclosures. That includes in the US and abroad. And we focus on the entire investment implementation process. So who has the authority to enter trades, to give trades? How is money moved to pay expenses and to facilitate redemptions, and to move money to pay margin for counterparties and things like that. And we also do a lot of confirmations outside of the manager to third-party service providers like auditors and administrators and consultants that assist the manager with compliance and technology and things like that. We focus a lot on valuation, especially to the extent that it's in more esoteric security holdings like loans or things like that, real estate, to the extent where it's not as easily priced, but yet is very influential on the effect of the management fees and performance fees. And lastly, which is very pertinent to what we're doing now, is trying to get a good sense of how well prepared the manager is from a cybersecurity perspective, which is a major focus of the SEC in recent years, but also how well can it manage something like the pandemic of this year that's happened, and how easily did the manager transition from working in its office and all of its personnel being there day to day to everyone working remotely. So we really look very closely at what their capabilities are in those instances. So the end product, this report I've described, it's very comprehensive, and and a lot of it is confirmations of things as opposed to us just summarizing them. And we really are trying to give at the forefront of that report an executive summary of considerations to say, here's things that are noteworthy. Some of them may be positive, some of them may be negative, and some of them may be different to our liking versus best practice in the industry. And then our clients can take that report and basically they take three actions at that point. They'll have an investment committee, depending on how formalized their internal investment process is, and they'll say, I'm either going to invest in this manager as it is, I'm not going to invest in this manager as it is, or I'm going to take certain elements of what Shadmoor has pointed out in these considerations, and I'm going to try and remediate them prior to funding this investment.
Right, that's wonderful. Can you walk us through a timeline of an engagement and the steps that make up that overall workflow?
Yes. So the the process of the operations diligence is essentially a 3 to 4 week process, whereby the client that we have the standing engagement with will introduce us to a fund over email. First, they'll call us up, and this is one of the things that is exciting about our job and keeps it dynamic, is that on a day-to-day basis, we're unfamiliar with necessarily what fund we're going to be reviewing. So I could come into the office one day and we're looking at a manager in Hong Kong or in London or in New York, and we may have familiarity with that management, but given how big the universe is, it's more likely than not we are unfamiliar with that manager. So it keeps things very interesting. And then after that introduction, we'll send a document request list to that manager and a sample agenda, and we'll put some time in place where we give the manager a few days to respond to our information request. We ask a few days after that so that we can carefully review the information that was sent to us, and it sometimes is in excess of 25 different documents, and it can include offering memorandums, fund financial statements, and policies and procedures, and compliance manuals, and all those sorts of things. And then under normal times, we would have gone on site, and we would have spent up to a half a day on site interviewing key personnel from the business side of the firm, including COOs and CFOs and CCOs and all those type of C-suite executives. And After that, we would have sort of a closing out calls with some of their service providers and the confirmations that we were doing in parallel. And then we have a closeout call with the manager to confirm that our understanding of various things is factually accurate and to clarify things. And then that ends up being resulting in the issuance of that 50-page report to our client. So I would say that that is the process. That process after that initial review can extend into a monitoring where, let's say someone is invested in one of our clients invested in 20 or 30 different funds, we may do that process for them every year or two, or we may supplement it with other things that are considered monitoring, such as quarterly questionnaires about a firm's operations or reviewing audited financial statements every year, things along that line.
That's great. You mentioned it a couple of times there, the pandemic. How has the workflow process changed during the course of this pandemic?
It's changed pretty significantly, but I'd say that the changes are really focused on three aspects. We were previously able to interview people face to face. We're not doing that now. We're doing that virtually. We used to be able to go on site and do certain elements of testing, which really means we were reviewing documents that were either confidential or proprietary that were not available in electronic format in advance. And for systems demos, like how a trading or order management system works, we also were having, by sheerly going on site, we were having the ability to assess the office environment, how secure it was, how are people situated in the office, is our manager in an office of another group or vice versa. So we've had to find substitutes for those things. And I think the virtual conferencing tools like Teams and Zoom and the others have been very good substitutes for interviewing people and for the on-site testing, which we now do through screen shares and things like that. Less so for the assessment of the office environment. People have provided us with tours of their office, but there's still very limited amounts of people who are actually in the office, and I think that's been the biggest hurdle for that.
Right. Great, thanks for this. This has been a wonderful background. What's the best way for folks to keep in touch with you and Shadmoor?
Well, we're located in Westport, Connecticut, and under normal times, the 5 team members are traveling fairly often because we're looking at managers in the New York area and also in the U.S. and occasionally abroad as well. But we have our website, so I encourage people to take a look at that, and you can sign up for our distribution list. We frequently put out white papers on various topics, as we did with the virtual ODD pandemic white paper we wrote last April. And I also would encourage anyone who's ever in Westport to give us a call. We would love to have some visitors. So thank you very much to Foreside, and appreciate the opportunity to share Shadmoor's business, and look forward to hearing from people.
Michael, thank you very much. We appreciate you joining the Foreside Service Provider Spotlight. It's been very enlightening on Shadmoor, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you. Take care.